When I was in 6th grade, I lived with my mom and uncle in a house in downtown Prince George, British Columbia. My uncle worked as a carpenter and was out of town a lot, while my mom worked a few blocks away downtown, and I went to school just down the street. One day, a random little lady wearing a kilt showed up and knocked on our doors, and she was with a really big but quiet middle-aged man. She asked for someone named Metro. I told her she had the wrong house, so she and the big man left. Then a week or so later, the lady apparently came back, but it was just my mom who was home. When the lady asked for the same person and was told she had the wrong house, she got super agitated and started yelling at my mom to get the F out of her house. My mom told me this story when I got home later that evening. Now this is where it gets weird. So I came home one day from school and I noticed there was a new clock on the wall. We had this black analog clock that hung above the stove, and it had gold trim. The clock, now gone, was replaced with this old vintage clock that looked like it was made out of a slice of firewood. I noticed it, but didn't really care of thinking anything of it. I assumed my uncle had come home and acquired a new clock. It was his house after all. So then I opened the fridge, and there's a 6-pack of Budweiser in there. My uncle drank a lot, but he was a Pennzoil guy, never touched bud. I went to the living room, and my mom's ashtray was packed with cigarette butts. Like packed, I noticed, but really didn't think much of it. Both my mom and uncle smoked. Perhaps there was guests over while I was at school. Anyways, a week or so later, I'm sitting in my room playing video games. I heard the sound of our front door opening really aggressively. We had single pane glass in our entry, so if you're really aggressive with the door, it would shake all the windows and be really loud. So that happens, and it's followed by the sound of that old lady's voice yelling, "Get the F out of my house." We had a chain latch on the door, which was the only thing stopping her from coming right in. Mom's standing with her foot against the door and she's yelling at me to call the cops, so I do. We're wondering where the big man was from the initial visit when she first showed up, asking for Metro. On the phone with the cops, the lady has half her head in the door and she's yelling at us. My cat, for whatever reason, was walking towards her and was almost in swinging range, so I'm trying to get up and grab the cat, but it's a cord phone. Chaos. Then I see someone walk up behind the old lady in her entryway, and my initial thought was that this was the big man she was with, but it was actually my uncle. My uncle was pretty big and very surly, and when he showed up, the old lady's attitude straightened right up. We opened the door for him, and he came in, and the cops showed up shortly after. They told us they were familiar with the lady, and that she was totally crazy. The really effed up part was putting together everything at the end. Turns out the clock, the beer in the fridge, and the excess amount of cigarette butts were all hers. And she was coming into our house when we weren't home and just lounging, smoking, chugging beers, hanging stuff on the walls. That was a wild discovery, so my mom spent the next 2 days cleaning up our entire house. The really effed up part is when we moved out of the house, we found bud cans in the basement. My mom shrugged it off, and I'm pretty sure that lady was in our house. And then when we came home, she'd run into the basement and hide. I'll never be able to describe the relief I felt when my uncle rolled up and changed the whole vibe of the situation. When I was in my early 20s, I ended up dog sitting for a week at my uncle's place, completely by myself. It was January and it was freezing outside. The house was built by my grandfather for his sister who passed away when I was about 6 years old. She died young from cancer. My only memories of her are from those last days when she was in hospice care, right in the living room. Everyone in the family loved her. I wish I could have known her better. A few years after she passed, my uncle and his partner bought the house and completely renovated it. It's actually a pretty nice place, especially considering it was built in the early 70s. So after my uncle handed me the keys and showed me how to use the security system, I settled in. I was excited to have the place to myself, especially since I usually had roommates and never really got any alone time. But what started as a relaxing week quickly turned into something much more unsettling. On the second day of my stay, we got hit with an Arctic vortex, and everything was covered in thick ice and snow. I was basically trapped inside. That second night, I couldn't fall asleep. I just laid there for hours counting sheep. At some point, I started hearing voices that seemed to be coming from outside. I remember thinking, wow, you can really hear the neighbors in this subdivision. Then about 20 minutes later, the home security system went off. That freaked me out, so I get up to check the alarm. The screen said basement door ajar. I didn't know what else to do, so I grabbed a knife, got the dog, and headed downstairs. Now the basement is basically unfinished, and there's a sliding glass door down there. My uncle always puts a bar on the track to keep it from opening, even if it's unlocked. When I got down there, the door was open and the bar had been removed. The ground outside was covered in snow, but there was no footprints. I thought about calling the cops, but then I remembered the stash of weed I had found in the basement and decided against it. To make things worse, I had taken a sleeping pill about 10 minutes before all this happened, so my body was getting heavier and heavier as I searched the house. Eventually, I just collapsed from exhaustion. When I told my friends and family about it later, most of them were skeptical. They said I probably left the door unlocked and maybe the dog opened it somehow. But that didn't make sense. The dog had been sleeping in my room, and no way could a dog remove the bar and slide open the door. What really got to me later was realizing that the door couldn't be opened from the outside. That meant someone or something was trying to get out. That made it even creepier. Anyways, that was just the beginning of the weird stuff. The next night, I was lounging on the couch watching movies when I heard a soft thump, thump, thump against the side of the house. It sounded like someone was throwing a tennis ball at the wall. At first, I brushed it off as just a pipe settling in the old house, but then it happened on the opposite side of the house. The sound started moving around to different sides of the house, always in the same order and rhythm. It repeated the pattern 3 times before moving to another part of the house. This went on for about 2 hours, and I was getting really frustrated and annoyed by the constant knocking. Then just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Over the next few days, I started noticing things being out of place. I'd set something down, and later it'd be somewhere else. At first, I thought it was just being forgetful, so I decided to get more organized. I started closing doors behind me to make sure I wasn't misplacing things. I even laid out my work uniform and shoes on the kitchen table to make getting ready in the morning easier. When the ice and snow finally cleared up, I went back to work that morning. I got up early, took a shower, and everything seemed fine. None of my stuff was out of place, and I was about to head out the door. I saw my shirt and shoes at the table and thought, great, everything's here and going smoothly. But when I bent down to tie my shoes and reached for my shirt, it was gone. I had just seen it folded and ready to go the night before, and now it was missing. I started feeling crazy as I searched the house, getting more and more stressed about being late for work. Eventually, I found my shirt in the spare bedroom, crumpled up in a ball and thrown into the corner of the room. I was so confused and frustrated as I made my way to work. Later that day, when I got back, I let the dog out through the basement sliding door. As I sat inside, avoiding the cold, I heard soft footsteps upstairs, moving from one side of the house to the other. I grabbed the dog and checked the whole place again, but of course I found nothing. At this point, I started doubting my insanity. I wondered if I was slipping into some kind of psychosis. The steps happened again the next day. On the last day of my stay, one of my friends came over to help me tidy up the house before my uncle returned. We were sitting downstairs while the dog was outside, both of us looking at our phones, when I heard the footsteps again. My friend had believed me at first when I told her about all the weird things happening, but this time I decided to stay quiet and asked if she heard it too. Suddenly, she looked up at me with wide, scared eyes. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. "There's someone up there," she said, pointing in the direction of the footsteps as they moved from one side of the house to the other. Then she jumped up and said, "I'm leaving right now." I had never felt so vindicated in my life. After doubting me the entire time, she was suddenly terrified. When my uncle and his partner got back, I asked them if they had ever experienced anything strange in the house. My uncle's partner said he once saw a woman in a white dress walking down their hallway. He also sometimes hears music playing from nowhere. Strangely, though, my uncle's dog never acted weirdly during my stay. If he had, it would have freaked me out even more. I still struggle to make sense of what happened. Sometimes I wonder if there was someone secretly hiding in the house, living in some unchecked corner. But then again, I don't think a person could have done some of those things I experienced. It's troubling to say the least. I had just bought my first house. I was in the house all weekend cleaning, scrubbing floors, raking leaves, and getting it in, moving and ready. I left Sunday night around 4:30 p.m. with the whole place in pristine condition. On Monday at 8 a.m., my movers arrived at my apartment to load up everything to move to the new house. I took some personal items and headed over for a drop-off by myself. I entered the house and rushed up the stairs, taking toiletries to the bathroom. On my way down, I began realizing that I could smell an awful smell that was like a mix of urine and cigarettes. When I left the house on Sunday, the entire house smelled like Clorox. I knew something was wrong. I realized someone had been in the house the night before after I left from a long day of cleaning. I thought to check upstairs while I was up there for trash damage, so I took a moment to check all the upstairs rooms and closets. As I went back downstairs, I then realized my living room window had been pushed in from the top and was hanging out off the windowsill. At that moment, I decided to get back outside and call the cops. I walked down the hall to the back door into the garage where I came in. I saw a light coming from under the basement door under the stairs. I opened it and called down, "Is anyone down there?" Silence. I repeated it, no response. I looked down deeper at a different angle and saw a leg scurry out of my viewpoint. I slammed the door shut and barricaded it by using the adjacent back entrance door, opening it, opening it so blocks the basement door from opening. Then I heard someone barreling up the stairs and aggressively trying to get through the door. We had a push and shove, and when he was cursing and threatening me, I got my phone out to call the cops. I fought the door back and forth with him going from threatening to begging to reasoning, etc. But I was terrified and I wasn't listening to a word. All I cared about was making sure this person did not get through the door. Finally, the cops arrived, took over. I went to my car while they did whatever they were doing with him. 20 minutes later or so, they came out, and I finally saw what the guy looked like. Someone who had been sober in 10 years probably. He cussed at me as they walked him to the car. The next 2 hours were spent with the cops taking evidence all over the house, cigarette butts, heroin in the basement, handprints on the windows, assessing damages, etc., and asking questions. When all this was going on, I checked my mail, and there was a note on top of my mailbox addressed to someone named Jamie about how to get into the house. It threw us all off. We had the same name, and we all thought it was addressed to me at first, but then we realized it was a coincidence. After 2 hours, the cops took all the evidence, and I was alone in the house again. My realtor asked me to take some pictures of the basement situation. Reluctantly, I went down there. As I was taking pictures, I saw something in the corner of my eye. It was a hand sliding into the shadows underneath the furnace. I ran up the stairs, barricaded the door, and called the cops again. They came and arrested the second person who was hiding in my basement. In a very small, seemingly impossible gap between the furnace and a wall, this person turned out to be female. I never thought or cared about whether they were male or female, strong or weak, or someone I could overpower. I never saw them at all, other than quick glimpses of body parts in the shadows. At least not until they were arrested. All I could think about is that the fact that they were intruders in my house, and I didn't know who or why. So all I cared about was making sure they did not get through that door. The two people that invaded my house are John and Jamie, both with a criminal history. Both have been charged with burglary, criminal mischief, and bail and probation violations, as well as destruction of property. I now understand why they were there. Likely could have been harmless, as many people love to tell me that they were just looking for an empty place to get high and do what they do. But that doesn't erase the fear and traumatic experience of realizing you are not alone in your home and have someone violently fight you through a door and threaten you that you cannot see. If there is one place you should always feel safe, it's in your home.